which we've now looked at, but also his crushings. His crushings. So today we began the last part of that 5-part series by looking at two men whom God crushed in the right sense for his purposes. We see how the Lord has done that as we look at the book of Jonah together. Please turn to Jonah chapter 1. As we see how God can bend a stubborn will. And then next Sunday we will look at another life as the Lord crushed Saul of Tarsus and become his spokesman as he humbled an arrogant man, a proud man. But Jonah is the one with the stubborn will. Most of us are familiar with the story, but it may have been a long time since you have read it. Let me read for you the first chapter of this story, and we will see how it all unfolds along the same line as the theme I mentioned earlier. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai: "Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are." But Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket, went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. But all this time, Jonah was sound asleep in the hold, so the captain went down after him. "How can you sleep at a time like this?" he shouted. "Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives." Then the crew cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods and caused the terrible storm. When they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. "Why has this awful storm come down on us?" they demanded. "Who are you? What is your line of work? What country are you from? What is your nationality?" Jonah answered, "I'm a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." The sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them he was running away from the Lord. "Oh, why did you do it?" they groaned. And since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, "What should we do to you to stop the storm?" "Throw me into the sea," Jonah said, "and it will become calm again. I know that this terrible storm is all my fault." Instead, the sailors rowed even harder to get the ship to the land, but the stormy sea was too violent for them, and they couldn't make it. Then they cried out to the Lord, Jonah's God. "Oh Lord," they pleaded, "don't make us die for this man's sins, and don't hold us responsible for his death. Oh Lord, you have sent this storm upon him for your own good reasons." Then the sailors picked Jonah up and threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. The sailors were awestruck by the Lord's great power, and they offered him a sacrifice, and they vowed to serve him. Now the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights.
for living. To search the Scriptures with Chuck Swindoll, be sure to download his newly formatted Searching the Scriptures studies by going to insight.org/studies. And now the message called God Bends a Stubborn Will.
It was with biting sarcasm that Wilbur Reese wrote these words. I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Not enough to explode my soul or disturb my sleep, but just enough to equal a cup of warm milk or a snooze in the sunshine. I don't want enough of God to make me love a black man or pick beets with a migrant. I want ecstasy, not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, not a new birth. I want about a pound of the eternal in a paper sack. I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. That's the kind of thing Jonah would have said, but that is before the fish. What do you mean, God? Go where? Well, why on earth would I ever want to go there? Nineveh not only is in the middle of the worst kind of people, Gentiles, it is the capital of Assyria. Even the name has a hiss in it. You forget, God, I'm a Jewish prophet, flag-waving, right-wing, zealous Jewish prophet. Send me to Jerusalem or Joppa, not Nineveh, where all the swine live. All of us are able to be very objective about Jonah, living so long ago and in a world we know little, if anything, about. Most could not even pick a place on the map where Nineveh was in light of today's geography. But when you put it in those terms, it's amazing, if I might use these words, how much prejudice makes sense if you have a stubborn will. And who of us doesn't? And told to go where we don't want to go, and to do what we don't want to do, very few of us quickly respond, yes, sir. I'm on my way. No, let me hit the pause button and put the context in a broader light. Most people, when asked the main theme of Jonah, would tell you it's about a prophet who tried to escape his calling. Wrong. Or they would say it's about a fish who swallowed a man. Wrong. The story of Jonah is about God, who bent the will of a stubborn prophet. That's the story of Jonah. Never forget that. Your life isn't about you. Your life is about your God who made you. It isn't about what you and I want. It's about what He wants, and is determined to carry out, whether we like it or not. When asked about the main message of the book of Jonah, most would probably miss that too. Let me cut to the chase and say it is about the crushing hand of God. The crushing hand of God. We love it when He blesses us, and we applaud it. We find great pleasure in His making us comfortable and giving us what we want and what we've asked for. And the joys that accompany that are innumerable. They're called God's blessings. We've all been recipients of them far more than we deserve. But His crushings are our plague. There's nothing pleasurable about them. We not only fear them, more often than not, we resent them. Even though both blessings and cursings are for our good and for His glory, we like the former. We'd love to do away with the latter. No one understood that better than Job's wife, who simply said to her husband in misery, covered with boils, having lost all of their children, having lost his means of making a living, having lost his home and all the family, curse God and die. Take the easy way out. Job's response reveals the depth of Job's maturity. Maybe you've forgotten what he said. I quote, "Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? As the new year unrolls, and it will, one moment at a time, one day, 1 week at a time, will you remember that question? You'll need it. And you'll need to ask yourself that question over and over, because I can assure you this year will include God's blessings and God's crushings. If you forget the question asked by Job, your response will be just like Jonah's. So before we cluck our tongues and wag our fingers at this stubborn prophet, I suggest we imagine ourselves in front of a full-length mirror and not forget the cause of most of our problems. All of them as they relate to a bad attitude, but most of them as they occur. It's time now to take our finger off the pause button and return to the prophet who preferred $3 worth of God. He really preferred mediocrity. He liked the name prophet. He just didn't like what it required. He enjoyed some of the benefits that came from being one. He just didn't like the assignment that he was given. And so we see the call in verses 1 and 2. And please observe, God does not stutter. The call is not vague. It's clear. It's precise. It's brief. The Lord gave this message to Jonah: get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment against it, because I've seen how wicked its people are. And that was true. It was a city that was the capital, as I said earlier, of Assyria, and the Assyrians were brutal, cruel victors, known for their torturings, for all of their mistreatment against their enemies once taken captive. Jonah knew all about those Assyrians. It was not bad enough that they were Assyrians. They were Gentiles. Now, because most of us are that, we don't see much wrong with it. But we're not Jewish prophets living in that era who are being called to go there with God's message. There was nothing wrong with the call, everything right about it, but Jonah wanted God to remember he's Jewish. He's not a world evangelist. He's a Jewish evangelist. Why in the world would you send me to a place like this? I'd go over like a bust of Luther in the Vatican. I showed up there in Nineveh. Jewish prophet comes with God's message. Oh, yeah. So he's got it all figured out in his mind. You see, when you have a stubborn will, your logic makes sense to you, even though you don't realize how illogical it is to fight against God. In fact, the Lord states, I know how wicked they are. Don't think I'm blind to that. I know where I'm sending you. Just like this year, I'm going to say to you on various occasions, do this. It won't be what you had wanted. Go there. It wasn't a destination you had in mind. Whether it's a hospital or a funeral home, or standing beside the bed of your sick child, or some failure that is a part of this new year. But you're there. So Jonah doesn't like it, so we're not surprised, verse 3, with his response. He got up. Good. He said to arise, so he got up. And he went. Good. He said to go. But he went on his way to Tarshish. Again, hard to find today. It's near Gibraltar in southern Spain. Due west from Joppa. And Nineveh is northeast. 500 miles. Tarshish is 2,500 miles west. In the opposite direction. Jonah knew what he was doing, and can't you imagine how he rationalized? He gets to Joppa, he finds a ship going to Tarshish. Oh, thanks, Lord. And he has the money for the ticket. It wasn't inexpensive. Thanks for providing the money, Lord. Lord has nothing to do with any of the negotiations, but Jonah in his mind has got it all figured out. You do that when you're stubborn and you're running. And we find in this third verse, interestingly, two references to an impossibility. He went in the opposite direction, A, to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa where he joined a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket, went on board, 2, or B, hoping to escape from the Lord. I ask you, how easy is it to escape from omnipresence? That's like getting out of air by being on earth. It's everywhere. You can't run and hide. I remember as a little kid when I was afraid, I thought if I just pulled up the covers, I would be protected from the booger man. I called him the booger man. My dad tried to get me to change the way that was pronounced, but I like booger better than bogeyman, so I'm hiding from the booger man. And that cover no more protected me than that ship would protect Jonah from the Lord. Wherever Jonah went, God was. Wherever Jonah ran, God was already there. Let me show you this. Hold your place and look at Psalm 139. It's really worth the excursion. Psalm 139, I want to read for you verses 7 through 12. Talk about a passage that's written for Jonah to remember. 139:7 begins, I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. Then he goes into several possibilities. If I go up to heaven, the Hebrew says, you are there has been added by our English translators. Simply says, if I go up to heaven, you. If I go down to the grave, you. If I ride the wings of the morning, and if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me, your strength will support me. If I go to the farthest ocean, dwell in your Bible reads, the uttermost part or the remotest part of the sea, like Tarshish. If I go to the most distant place I can even imagine, he's there. I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. When W.A. Criswell was preaching and there had just been the Sputnik that had orbited the Earth, and they were so pleased, the Russians were, to announce that they were up there and they didn't see God. Criswell's response the following Sunday was, had you stepped out of your spacesuit, you would have seen God. You may think you're getting away from God's presence by going to church. Are you kidding me, Jonah? Get a life. When you want only $3 worth of God, then you've got $3 worth of theology. But when you think clearly, you realize you can't run from omnipresence, continuing. Even there, your hand will guide me, your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me, and the light around me to become night, but even in darkness, I cannot hide from you. To you, night shines as bright as day. Darkness and light are the same to you. Wow. I love that. With God, there's no darkness. He is all light. Darkness ends when we pass from this earth to heaven. There is no light there because the sun is the light of it. It's the place of constant light.
A deeply convicting message based on the choices Jonah made. You're listening to Insight for Living. Chuck Swindoll titled today's study, God Bends a Stubborn Will. And we urge you to keep listening to hear how Jonah's story unfolds. Chuck is committed to presenting the truth of God's Word, even when it's unpopular, and even when it makes us squirm. Jonah shows us that God requires complete surrender of our will. As Chuck said, God is not a vending machine from which we can purchase $3 worth of His goodness. And when you partner with Insight for Living, you can have every confidence that Chuck will represent these challenging truths with clarity and conviction. As we step into a new year of ministry together, let me encourage you to become a monthly companion. This makes your partnership with Insight for Living very simple, and the compounding effect of a monthly contribution has a huge impact on those who gain access to Chuck's teaching. When you give your first gift as a monthly companion today, you're invited to request a special CD series containing 6 listener favorites from last year. We're calling these 6 messages from Chuck Our Best for His Highest. To become a monthly companion right now, call 1-800-772-8888 or go online to insight.org/monthly companion. To give a one-time donation and request the CD series of 6 listener favorites, address your request to Insight for Living, Post Office Box 5000, Frisco, Texas 75034. And finally, let me draw your attention to one of the most important resources ever offered to our listening family. I'm referring to the brand new Swindoll Study Bible. This comprehensive volume represents the culmination of Chuck's study in the Scriptures. It's offered in 3 different bindings and comes in the New Living Translation. To purchase the Swindoll Study Bible right now, call 1-800-772-8888 or go online to insight.org/study Bible.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a story of how God can bend your will.
And Swindoll talks more about how God bends a stubborn will. Friday on
there you go.
Insight for Living.
It's about Jonah and the big fish. And once again, I hope everybody has a great day. I'll see you later. Remember, God's hand is on us.